Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Let'sRun.com Track Talk podcast. Plenty to discuss this week. Indoor track is officially back. We had the New Balance Indoor Grand Prix. We had the Dr. Sander invite in New York. We had boots on the ground in both locations, so a lot to talk from each of those races, all the distance races at those meets. Edward Cheserak has decided that he wants to try to run for Kenya this year. Nike has completed its investigation into the Nike Oregon project, so we'll talk about the findings there or the lack thereof. Tyler Day runs 13:16, Northern Arizona senior, to set the American collegiate record in the 5,000 meters at BU. World Indoors suddenly seems up in the air. Is that still happening due to the coronavirus outbreak in China? We'll finish off by giving our Super Bowl picks, Kansas City against San Francisco. But first, Weldon, give the people an ad.
I think you mean sponsored plug, John. Do you guys know what's 31 days from today?
The Olympic marathon trials.
Very good, John. Very good. John, do you have your tickets to the Olympic marathon trials? Hotel accommodations?
I guess the question is, have you guys booked them for me yet? And no, you have not.
That is correct. But if we have not booked our tickets and accommodations to trials, that means still time for everyone else to book. Make it a great weekend, everyone. Olympic marathon trials a month from now, February 29th in Atlanta, and then the next day, March 1st, the Publix Atlanta 5K, 10K, half marathon and marathon. It really doesn't get any better than that for running in the U.S., the trials, and you can run a race the day after. So make it a weekend in Atlanta. We're going to have like a fatwa, Let'sRun.com fatwa. If you're within 4 hours of Atlanta driving, you must be there. Otherwise, you will lose your Let'sRun.com card. Flying, well, it's up to you. If you have to fly, you don't have to go. But for those on the West Coast, we have a different fatwa. Flying 3,000 miles, you may not have to do it, but we've got a race for you. The Can-Am XC Cup. That is March 1st in beautiful Victoria, British Columbia. Cross country for the masses, and you can represent Team USA. They have 5-year age groups, so you're 40 years old. You go run, you're on Team USA for the USA. Pretty cool. Check it out.
All right. Well, let's begin our discussion of last week's indoor track meets. There are a lot of races. Robert, you sort of observed them from afar. Weldon and I might be biased because we were actually at the meets. So tell me, what was the most interesting race to you? What were you most excited by this past weekend?
Excited, like in a good way, or interested, or could it be a bad way?
It could be a bad way. What were you most interested? What do you want to talk about right now?
Well, I feel like it's a disservice to the pros to start talking about Caitlin, Tuohy, Mary Cain, but that's kind of where I want to go. In terms of the pro performances, I was very impressed by Brice Hopple, Donavan, Brazier, and Jessica Hull. I thought they were the leaders for me, but I guess let's go Cain, Tuohy. To be honest, Saturday, this is going to sound weird to the people, the listeners. We were celebrating Christmas at our house. There's been a lot of illnesses. The grandparents had not been able to come in. The child had been sick. The grandparents were sick. Then the child was sick. We literally celebrated Christmas with the in-laws this Saturday. So wasn't exactly watching the races on TV. I did get a break in the action at one point. I logged onto the message board.
Don't lie, you weren't watching that, Robert. Then once that Cain Tuohy race came up, I saw live updates from Rojo on the live thread.
I didn't watch a single race on TV, not one.
So how are you giving updates of this race? Were you refreshing the results page or something?
I wasn't giving updates. I went to the thread and I think Weldon was there, and I realized the race was going on. People were updating the splits, and then I think I went to the timing page and just was able to analyze it from there. And I think on this podcast last week, we said that Cain is going to get crushed, and I was kind of worried about her being overmatched, and that proved to be the case. I was following the thread. She fell off the pace, and I said, yep, she's lost contact. But then I was shocked when the next update was, Tuohy's falling off, and she's falling hard. Cain's going to catch her. So Mary Cain, actually, former high school phenom, beat the current high school phenom, Caitlin Tuohy, which was a shock. But neither girl, or young woman in this instance of Cain, ran well. John, you have the times for them.
Yeah, 9:24 for Cain and 9:32 for Caitlin Tuohy. I actually think Mary Cain's effort, I know she wasn't happy with the result, but the way she ran it wasn't that bad. She she went out hard and tried to hang with the pack, and she couldn't because she admitted she wasn't, the winning time in that race was like 8:48. She wasn't going to be able to do that. And she knew that she wasn't in shape to run that fast, but what are your options? If you're going to try to run like 9:15 or something, she would either have to hang way off the pack and run her own race from the gun, or go out harder and fall back. And she went out hard. She fell back. She died a little bit more than she would have wanted the last 1K, but I think she's getting out there racing. She's giving it a shot, which is something she openly admitted she wouldn't do when she wasn't feeling fully fit the last few years. And she's got this long-term focus in outdoors. We don't know if we'll see her again until the outdoor season, but for Cain, it wasn't a great result, but I don't think it was a disaster.
It wasn't a disaster, but Mary Cain's days as an elite athlete, I think, are over. She's not going to make the Olympic trials. And to me, the result is more troubling for Tuohy. I know she's amazing. I know she's won 3 straight, but this is starting to remind me a little bit, John, of Mary Cain in high school. The year Mary Cain won World Indoors, she also did in PR, and I got very nervous about it.
You mean World Juniors?
Excuse me, yes. And Tuohy, while she won NXN, it wasn't as dominant as it's normally been. She ran 9:01 in this race last year. She runs 9:20 this year. It's just
9:32.
Excuse me, 9:32. The edge is off. It doesn't seem to be heading in the right direction. But people like this. A lot of people on this podcast, or I don't know, people are used to me going off. And I'm going to introduce a new segment, Rojo's Rant. And I've got 2 of them.
This is a new segment?
Well, it's got a new title. Companies out there, if you want to have a sponsored segment, Rojo's Rant is available for sponsorship. So I was thinking about this. The very next day, Katelyn Tuohy came back and doubled at her county championships, I think in the same building. She ran both the 3,000 and the 1,500. She ran pretty fast, John. I don't know if you have the splits. I think it was like 9:40 in the 3,000. And
yeah, she ran 9:40 in the 3K and 4:36 in the 1,500.
There's now a thread on that on our world famous message board. Folks, if you're a high schooler and you just came to Let's Run because of Josh Method last week, we have the front page. It's like your front page of a sports page. We have the news, but we also have a world famous message board where you can be a fan and discuss the action. But on the message board, there's a thread called Tuohy Back Racing Day After Doc Sender Invite. And some people are saying this just proves her coach is a moron, etc. They're criticizing him. I don't have a problem with her racing on the team. I think being part of a high school team is something very important, and it's something that's not really pointed out very much about Mary Cain. Mary Cain quit the high school team, very early in her career, despite going from Bronxville, which is a very well-respected team in New York. So, I can understand Tuohy has a very disappointing race. She doesn't, in the pro race, she doesn't talk to the media, try to get her back into it, support the team.
This is the slowest building rant I've ever heard in my life. Let's get it going here.
Anyways, I don't have a problem with her running with the team. I think that's fine. She's so much better than those athletes. She can run as a teammate. But there's a great message board post, and it's by an anonymous poster named Namecheck, and he's got the splits. Every single lap virtually in both the 3K and the 1,500 was slower than the lap before. This is idiotic. Why the coach would let her go out, hammer from the gun, and then just fade is really stupid. One of the things that John Kellogg, one of the mantras of his coaching, and John may be coming out of retirement soon, folks. You'll have to pay to get this access to John Kellogg, but it may be happening. But I always used to say this when I was coaching at Cornell for 10 years. Almost everything you do in running should be slower to faster. You want to finish workouts. Your best races feel almost effortless. It's like, I could go so much faster. And you want to train that way, like start slow, finish fast. If I was the coach, and I said, Coach, please let me run the county championships. I want to help the team. I'd say fine, but run the first mile of the 3K with the other girls and then bring it down so you feel positive. You feel like, okay, I can go faster. I'm getting back into the groove. To go out and run 4:58 and then die to a 9:40 is absolute stupidity. It's just so stupid, so disappointing. That's it. That's Rojo's Rant number 1 for the day.
Wow. Took a while there. I got a lot of things to say. One, this is going back about 10 minutes now when Robert's like, John, you got the times? It's like, like John's like the keeper of results to the Armory track meet. But yeah, I was there. It was pretty, I don't know, I shouldn't say shocking. Tuohy fading like that was the shocking part, right? I think Cain's race was pretty much as expected. The end time, 9:24, was actually 1 second faster than she ran, I think, about 17 days ago. So how much are you going to improve? I don't care who you are. How much are you going to improve in 2 weeks? So Cain kind of said, I think she said she thought maybe she'd run 9:10 or 9:15. She goes out at 9-minute pace. What's going to happen if you're not in 9-minute pace and you go out at it? You're going to fade. So whatever, she fades to 9:20, 9:24. Who really cares? The sort of shocking part was that so Cain dropped off right before the mile, and there was a gap. She was off. She was second to last at the beginning, but then she was off the pack. And you're just kind of figuring, wow. Just to see it, it's kind of eye-opening because Cain's still a huge name. She gets the biggest ovation of the crowd when the gun goes off, all that stuff at the starting line. And then a few minutes later, Tuohy just starts fading, and she faded so hard. She started running 80 seconds for 400, and then I think about 90, and it was no contest. I think Cain passed her about 400 to go. Everybody's there. They want to talk to Cain and Tuohy. Tuohy's a high school kid, so her coach or whoever, she didn't come through the media area, which is fine. But I think one thing these high school kids got to learn is like, so she had a bad race. Just go say something about it. They're not, some of these high school kids aren't coped to talk about it, which is fine. But I think at some point they need to be, right? Because
I don't mind a high schooler not talking. If it was a college kid, I would expect them to talk. But she's 17. She's running against pros. I don't think she has an obligation to talk to the media.
Oh, I 100% agree. She doesn't have an obligation. But I think at some point, how do we teach these kids to cope with the so-called, quote, failure, right? We say failure, right? Did you guys know that Tuohy's time still the number one time in the country right now for high school girls? So she runs 30 seconds slower than she did last year, and it's still the number one time in high school. That's how good she was. Like, the expectations are so high for her. We're sort of evaluating her. We should just say, like, look, she's a really good high school runner. I hope her the best in the future. Most likely, does she become a world beater? I think the historical evidence says no.
But here's the thing. Historical evidence says that no American high schooler would become a world beater. It's like very, very rare for anyone to become like one of the best in the world out of high school, even if you are one of the best Americans. I mean, my take on this is she's 17. Like, I'm not going to write her off or condemn her career or say anything's over. Like, she's not as good as she was last year. Okay, that happens. We'll see how she makes it through her career. We don't know. It could last a couple years. It could last 10, 15 more years. I don't know. She's 17. I'm not going to project too much on her. I just want to see. She's going to a good school, running school next year in NC State. We'll see how they handled her. But we have plenty of evidence of phenoms flaming out immediately, and we have somewhat less evidence of strong high school runners actually going on to professional success. And we don't know which one Tuohy's going to be right now.
Yeah, and one thing I think is important to understand here, John and I were talking about this off air the other day, was it's pretty normal, particularly when these women are going through the maturation process, for them to stall in their improvement. The question is, can they come out the other side? We don't know. She's still just going to have a good college career, but I don't know. She probably wanted to run this race to prove that she's better than last year. To me, the writing was on the leaves all fall. She's not as good as she was last year. She's a little bit worse even on her best day. So I don't know. I think I've never been a big fan of indoor track. I guess it keeps high school kids busy and stuff like that, but it's just like, she was just running a national level meet in December. Here we are. It's only like 6 weeks, 7 weeks later, and we have to run another big race. I would have just chilled it indoors, but hey, I guess they were trying to get back on the PR train.
Robert coining a new phrase, the writing was on the leaves. Also, before we move on, I just want to give credit. Nicole Hutchinson, we haven't mentioned her yet. She actually won the race in 8:48, looked pretty good doing so as well. So figure, since we talked about the people who were, 14th and 15th or 13th and 14th in that race, we may as well give the winner some love.
Good call, John. And while we're talking about Cain, I think we need to move to the next big topic. Came out yesterday. Aaron Strout in women's running has reported that Nike has concluded its investigation into its treatment, the Nike Oregon Project's treatment of the women on the team that Mary Cain exposed in the New York Times. Mary Cain did not participate in this investigation. Mary Cain called for an independent investigation of Nike's practices. Nike said, no, we're not doing that. We're just going to investigate ourselves. So as Nike's investigation of themselves is over, and Stroud has 5 bullet points that are going to result from this, according to Nike. Again, there's no third-party independent verification of this. And they are: 1, Nike will invest into scientific research into the impact of how does elite training affect girls and women. Nike will increase the number of female coaches it has. They will hire a VP of global women's sports marketing in the coming weeks to have, quote, strategic oversight over Nike's female athletes. They will create an athlete think tank to help the company understand the opportunities and challenges faced by female athletes. And they will partner with the Crisis Text Line, a free confidential text messaging service for people to ask for help when in crisis. What is your guys' reaction to this development?
Okay, my take is I think it's good that they're taking some action on this and trying to affect change. I think hiring a VP of global women's sports marketing is a good idea. Hopefully there's a woman in that role because they're fairly underrepresented in that area of the sport. I think that it is, I don't know. I mean, I'm sort of I don't think necessarily does the public have a right to these findings, I guess is the question. I'd like to see them. I think Mary Cain would like to see them. I'm sure a lot of people would like to see them, and I bet like former and present Nike athletes, if they reached out and asked to see them, I think would be good. I think it would be a good look for Nike, as Mary Cain said, to make the argument, make the findings public, essentially say, you know, we had some issues, and maybe you redact some stuff for privacy issues if you need to, but you know, say, hey, look, there were some issues here. We're taking steps to correct them. Here's what we found. She told Women's Running, it looks both weak and cowardly that as a corporation, they won't release what they found. My other issue with this is we don't actually know who was conducting this investigation. All we know it was Nike. They didn't make it clear to Women's Running which person was leading the investigation. And Cain actually didn't participate for this reason. She said there was no real transparency in the process, so I became very frustrated with the fact that there was no clear-cut person in charge. It was Nike investigating Nike, and seemingly some of the people involved in the process were investigating themselves.
Yeah, I think, John, that was the key word. You said we don't know who was doing the investigation. I don't think it really matters when it's Nike doing its own investigation. It's sort of to me, that doesn't give the investigation much credibility. I think a bigger thing that needs to be done is if Nike wants to be serious about making some change. I mean, they're the leader in the running world, right? They do a lot that's really good, but the running division in some ways is run like a little mafia. John Capriati has been there forever. Alberto Salazar had carte blanche to do whatever he wanted. Chris Wetstein was beaten up by somebody and nothing seemed to happen. At one point, John Capriati, allegedly threatened Danny Mackey. Nothing seemed to happen. I think there's a bigger cultural problem that an outside investigation could look into. How do we know they're really going to ask the difficult questions? Is someone's really going to ask Alberto what needs to be asked? If it's an internal thing, when sort of the impression's been given that he can do whatever he wants. So that's one thing. I think with the resources of Nike, it should have been an independent investigation, and then Cain would have participated and said what she said. Having said that, I still think there's more to come out. There's some message boards posters saying, look, this was an internal thing, but Nike wanted to handle it that way. I guess that's their prerogative. I disagree with it, but they said, look, there was town hall meetings held at Nike. Now, this is an anonymous poster saying this, and they're like, anyone could have attended, and the findings were released. So if that's the case, I think we'll learn a little more maybe what came out, if it's more than just a report, and people, I guess the Nike employees probably aren't going to want to talk, but I think more will leak out then about exactly what was found. So if they did have town halls and
this is the other thing, Nike Oregon Project, I mean, I'd be interested to know within Nike corporate culture, how many people at Nike actually care about the Nike Oregon Project? Like, outside of the ones who work specifically in professional running. Like, to me, most people in the running world really care about the Nike Oregon Project. For better or worse, they're interested in it. How much of the difference does it make? Like, how much do the people at the Nike campus actually care about this pro running group that they happen to sponsor?
Well, John, I think there's a lot of women that care about how Nike treats women.
Yeah.
Whether it's employees and contractors. So I don't think they actually care so much. But I think
and men care as well how women are treated, I think.
They don't necessarily like a male-dominated business ignoring the concerns of women, in terms of whether it's maternal leave, whether it's eating disorders and stuff like that. But, I mean, come on, guys. Do we expect anything else? I mean, this is a company that's, had dating back, we've exposed their sort of, I would say, corruption or just not giving an F about anything, what other people think. They've had dopers in their VIP box at the Olympic trials. Jonathan Gault broke this story with the police report. There was allegedly a death threat made by John Capriati against Danny Mackey.
Can we also, though, temper that a bit? The word death threat, kind of give the impression that, like, he wasn't going to go out and kill someone. You know, like, there was a confrontation in front of each other, and like, he's like, I'm going to kill you. I mean, I think, yes, it's a death threat technically, but it's also not like it's something said passionate. Like, I don't want to give the wrong impression to what was said there. Obviously, I'm not trying to minimize it, but like, just to give a little context, because when death threat, people are like, what the hell? Some Nike guy was going to like do a hit on somebody. So just a little context there.
Well, I think you could say that about anything, Alberto yelling at Mary or something like that. I mean, it was a death threat. He said, I'm going to kill you. That's a death threat. Nike supposedly did its own investigation of that and hired a firm. And I think that the employees, well, of course, the Nike employees denied that it happened. So that, they washed their hands of it. So, I'm glad. I do think Cain and through the New York Times were able to put public pressure on Nike, and they're much more aware of, and it's just, we're becoming much more of a woke society in general. They're going to have to treat women better. Hopefully they do. But I think that this pretty much went how we expected. Of course, Cain didn't participate. And of course, Nike sort of, did release it. They could say they did something and people are going to move on.
Well, speaking of Mary Cain investigations, she spoke to the media, and I was in that group for 18 minutes after the race. Mary's got a platform now, and she's using it, which is great. But we learned some new stuff. And for the first time, Mary expressed a big regret she has from her time at the Oregon Project, besides what happened to her personally. So we got some audio on that.
I'm going to tell a really honest story, and I'm going to try not to get emotional as I tell it. But after my own experience as a young pro, or at least a young person who's on, the pro scene, there is one life regret that I have with everything that I went through, and that was that there was one younger athlete who joined the Oregon Project after I did. She was a girl from Japan, and I could go into a whole spiel about it, but she joined the year that I moved home to New York to try to get over my eating disorder, and I never said anything to her. I never warned her. I never even admitted to her what I was currently going through. And in a lot of ways, it was because selfishly I was still trying to stay on the team. And even though I knew that it was, just to put it bluntly, a dangerous environment for a young athlete that I was in, I think I was in such self-denial that I let her join that team. And that's really one of my biggest regrets, because she went through something very similar to I did, and we continued talking kind of after she left the team. I reached out to her a bunch of times on Instagram. Her Instagram isn't up anymore. I haven't heard from her in a while. Ever since my story came out, I've been kind of looking for her, because I just wanted to say I'm sorry. And for me, my biggest thing is I don't want there to be another Nozomi, and if I can stop that, I won't be a coward anymore. And even if I don't know the athlete, even if I don't know the program that they're on, I will always be there as an advocate for you. And so I think it's the least I can do to, really be a sounding board whenever I can, because I can't ever forgive myself for not being brave in the past.
Pretty emotional audio by Mary. And I'm not sure even where to begin in talking about it. One, this Nike investigation, did they talk to Nozomi? And she was the Olympic youth 3,000 meter champ. She really hasn't done that much since. But one, Nozomi's hasn't spoken out about this, so we can't really tell her story. But I can't really blame Mary too much if she felt like she was in such a vulnerable place for speaking out. But of course, she's going to have regrets if she felt like she caused someone else to suffer, be harmed, or whatever. But I kind of wish we knew a little bit more like what this report found about the treatment of women in the project besides Mary's case, because also if Mary's not there, Mary may not, unless Nozomi told her, how's Mary going to know exactly what happened? And it sounds like Nozomi hasn't spoken to Mary. Once Mary went public, sounds like Nozomi sort of has gone off social media entirely and hasn't had any contact with Mary. So that may not represent anything. Maybe just a coincidence, but there's more to be there.
Talk about putting undue pressure on someone. This is a great idea. Let's take a teenage girl from Japan who probably may or may not speak English, have her move to the United States and train under Alberto Salazar. Like, where are the adults in the room? But, I think this shows this happens. Mary feels bad because she didn't stand up as a young person for other people. She realizes when she was there, she let other people be mistreated. But this is normal. I appreciate her for acknowledging this, but think about how many people have received hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars from Nike, like Mary did, and just have looked the other way while sort of things that should not happen have happened, whether it be the doping by all the Nike athletes, whether it be just John Capriati running that place like he's a dictator. So,
but Robert, come on. I mean, I think it's a little bit different. Doping from all the athletes was you proof that Nike itself was doping athletes and these other athletes know it. That's not really something they can stop, even if they think something was going on. But in this instance, if you were in a situation you felt was unsafe, it's a little more direct step to try to warn someone. But I'm not placing that burden on Mary. But I think it's a reminder, all of us, and Mary saying, like, hey, people, if you're in a bad situation, do what's right. Do what's right. And I thought it was interesting how Mary referred to herself as the cowardly Mary Cain. The cowardly Mary Cain wouldn't have run the race at the Army because she wouldn't have gotten beat. She wouldn't have wanted her ego to suffer. So I think Mary's pretty harsh in some ways that she didn't speak up. But there were huge power imbalances, right? Like, she's a high school kid under Alberto. So how Mary was treated, I mean, there's power imbalances with Kara Goucher and stuff. But when you're a high school kid and the person paying your bills is all powerful and has carte blanche to do at Nike, it's probably harder to say anything. Much harder.
Right. Mary's showing incredible maturation. She's only 23. When you're 23, it's hard to acknowledge that you were not that mature when you were in high school or whatever. So I think it's amazing.
Final thing on Mary Cain. After she spoke, I went up to her and essentially apologized to her because I know some difficult, terrible things were said about her on Let's Run when she was in high school. And I was like, look, Mary, I'm just sorry that those things are on there and said to you, and we want to do better with the moderating. And she appreciated it and said, yeah, like, you guys need to do better. You guys do great. Your content's amazing, but I think the boards aren't a safe space for a lot of people, and it needs to be. The pain she's gone through, I don't want that on anyone. And we definitely 10 years ago, I mean, I think we're doing better day in, day out, but what she went through, and just there's never been a runner like her. If you're going to, I just can't imagine reading crap about me as a high schooler.
And we just spent 10 minutes talking about Katelyn too, who's a high schooler. So I just think when you're that prominent, that's the way it's going to happen. But I'm glad that you took that time to talk to her, Weldon. But John wanted to know what most struck me on the weekend. I went with something a little bit negative. Let's talk about what most impressed me on the weekend, John. In terms of the two big meets, I think I was very impressed by Brice Hopple, 2:17 in the 1,000 at the New Balance Indoor Grand Prix. He gets the victory. I know he was fourth in the world in the 800. So let's remember that. Brice Hopple, fourth in the world in the 800. So he's pretty damn good. But I didn't really know how he would extend to the 1,000. I mean, he only ran it a handful of times. His college PR was 2:34 in the 1,000. So his PR in the 1,000 was 2:34 coming into this race. Now he had run like a 3:45, 1,500, but to see him extend up to the 1,000, get the victory in a hard-fought race was impressive to me. Shows that his training is going well, and we can expect big things from him in 2020.
Brice Hopple ran 1,000 meters in college in 2:34. This seems insane. He was really good in high school, right? That's not very good for a college runner to run 2:34 in the 1,000. I guess he might have been a freshman.
Did he win it, John? Did he win that race?
Oh, he did win that race. He was a freshman. He won it. All right. Yeah, that gets to my point, Weldon. This thing struck me after watching him come back on Jake Whiteman at the end of this race. Brice Hopple's just a winner. This guy goes out and he just has a nose for the finish line. He knows what to do. He doesn't panic. If you watch this one, he sat back from the rabbit And then he got past Sol Ordonez of Spain and Jake Whiteman, both sort of blew by him with just under 2 laps to go. And Ordonez cut in kind of quickly, and so Hoppel kind of had to lose his momentum a little bit. And I'm like, oh, is he just gonna? How will he respond? This is a January race. Does he even care? And he was still pretty far back. Like even with just over 100 meters to go, he was in third. But then he makes a move around Ordonez, and then I'm like, oh, he's closing on Whiteman. He could get there, and he just times it perfectly. He runs him down in the home straight. You could tell he was tired. He was definitely working hard, but he got there, and Jake Whiteman was 5th in the world in the 1500 last year. He's no slouch either. Brice Hopple, really impressive race, and 2:17.41. It's the 3rd fastest time ever for an American. And now, granted, it's the indoor 1,000, so it's not exactly the outdoor 1500 there, but he definitely impressed me. And they were talking to him afterwards, like, yeah, what are your goals? Lewis Johnson asked him, and he's like, I want an Olympic medal. And if you're 4th in the world and you got the Olympics next year, that makes sense. So Brice Hopple, definitely one of my winners for the weekend.
Can I just apologize to Jake Whiteman? My God, 5th in the world. I had no idea. That's pretty amazing. If he was an American, we would have noticed a little bit more, but how good that was. But there was another impressive mid-D 800 result.
Wait. We got to stay in Hoppel for a second. I mean, it was an amazing comeback. And an indoor 1,000 of 2 guys pass you after you've been leading, especially if you're an 800 guy. I mean, Whiteman's got more endurance than him, right? He's a 1,500 guy, 5th in the world. He gets past, and I was like, oh, wow, that was a good run, but like, oh, he's not winning this thing. I mean, I thought, no way. And Hoppel has that, like, just desire to win. I just was thinking about this. I'm like, wait, we didn't talk about Kobe. And this is going to be a crazy analogy, but like, Kobe was kind of controversial for a lot of things, even outside of basketball, ignoring those. But even on the basketball court, people think, oh, he's a ball hog. He shoots too much. His advanced stats aren't that good. But the guy was just the fiercest competitor. I mean, there was no denying it. All these other opposing coaches are coming out, and the guy's will to win, we underestimate this. Oh, everybody wants to win. But certain guys, you see it at another level. And I think Bryce has that.
Yeah, let's move on to another guy who impressed me, also an American 800-meter runner. He was not running the 800 in Boston. He ran the 600. That's Donavan Brazier. Now, we all knew he was going to win this race, but really what impressed me more was his mindset. He ran 1:14.39. That's the 2nd fastest time ever in the indoor 600 after his world best of 1:13.77 last year at USA's. And when he crossed the finish line, he was not very impressed with himself. And he comes through in the mixed zone. He's like, yeah, I was kind of disappointed. Fans all wanted me to put on a show, and I didn't get out hard enough that first 300, and I cost myself a world best. And I was like, that's such a high bar to set for yourself, though. And he's like, yeah, it is, but I want to keep getting better. And this is a guy who just broke the American record, won the world title last year at the age of 22, and he's like, look, that's great. I'll always have that win, but I want to keep getting better. There's way more for me to accomplish in the sport. I want to run faster. I want to win more races. He says he wants to retire with more professional victories than defeats, which as a track racer, that's really hard to do. But right now, he's got 17 wins and 14 losses, so he's on pace to do it. And he's going to be favored in pretty much every race he runs this year. So he does not seem like one of those guys, Donavan Brazier, who is just going to rest on his laurels. And I think that's easier to do when you're the world champion going into an Olympic year, as opposed to sort of the Olympic champion coming off that, or world title going into an off year. But Brazier's mindset and mentality, I think, really won me over this weekend.
And let's forget about another US 800-meter runner, Isaiah Harris, who made worlds.
He made it in 2017, and then 2019, I think he would have had a decent shot to make it if he hadn't been hurt. He could have been the 4th guy if USATF had done their rules correctly, because the Diamond League gave us a 4th person. It was Brandon Kidder instead, and Harris was running better than Kidder at the end of the season.
Anyways, he ran at the New York meet, got the win in like 1:48.0 something. So, folks, he's running well. Brazier's running well. Hoppel's running well. That's 3 people. There's only 3 on the Olympic team last time I checked. And there is somebody else, former U.S., well, I shouldn't say former star, but there's another 800-meter runner, Clayton Murphy. Remember him, John?
2009, he made the World Championship final last year. I mean, it's not like
Last year. And he, of course, won an Olympic medal in 2016, coming off of college. So he's an Olympic medalist. You think, wow, this is his chance to win gold. He ran the mile this weekend. He was terrible. He runs 4:03.
6th place in the race.
It was only a 3:59 race, but that is not good. He's lost his coach. Salazar's gone. He's returned back to his college coach, who is the guy who coached him to the Olympic medal. So nothing wrong there. But I don't know. Like, one of those 4 men is not going to be on the Olympic team.
And that's why the Olympic trials are so great, is we have when events where we have like 4 or 5 good guys and someone has to miss out, it makes it so exciting. Yeah, Murphy, not a great race for him, and he admitted that, but he's a guy who in the past has taken defeats really hard, and he was actually surprisingly sort of circumspect after this race, and he said he's only really been doing tough workouts for the last 3 weeks. This one, he had no idea where he was going to be. He hadn't done any time trials or anything, really to tell him what he was going to run in this race. And he's like, yeah, it was easy the first half, but we weren't really running that fast. And the second half, I just didn't have it. I think the toughest thing for him, though, is he switched to Alberto Salazar at the start of the 2018 season. And he won the U.S. title that year, but he also said, it took him a little bit to get used to Salazar's training and have it work for him. And I think he was starting to find that after 2019. And yes, his World Championship race, he was awful there. But the rest of 2019, he was pretty consistently good on the Diamond League circuit. And he's finally starting to figure it out, this training under Salazar. And now he suddenly is not allowed to work with Salazar. He has to go back to Lee Labadie, under whom he had a lot of success. He said it was sort of like catching up with an old friend, returning to working with Labadie. But at the same time, he had spent the past 2 years getting used to Salazar's training, and now he has to sort of reset and go back to what he was doing before. It's not what you want to be doing heading into an Olympic year, so you sort of feel for Clayton in there. But he is a really talented guy. He's usually a good racer when he's in shape, so I think, I'll judge him based on his outdoor. This wasn't a good start, and if he was going for the world indoor team, well, actually, that's a whole different can of worms, because who even knows who's going to be trying to make that. But not a great race, but I'm not going to write him off after one bad race.
It's interesting with Murphy to me in the sense of there's kind of this perception that he hasn't been nearly as good as he used to be in recent years. He ran the Olympic medal 142.93 in 2016. And then I kind of think, what's he done since? Each of the last 3 years, he's run 143. 143.60 in 2017, 143.12 in 2018, and 143.94 in 2019. So he's been running pretty good. It's just the fact that, I think that the fact that in 2017 he tried the 800, 1500 double at the USA Championships and ended up not making the team, which really dampened things there.
Speaking of 800 guys, this is a World Indoor Years. Or, well, it may be a World Indoor Year. It's supposed to be a World Indoor Year. We could talk about that in a minute, but the World Indoor Championships, I'm betting they get canceled or moved out of China. I mean, it seems like almost 100% likely that's the case. It's amazing the talent the U.S. has had at the 800 on the men's and women's side recently. But I was just thinking of 2 other names. Boris Berrien, gold medal, 2016 World Indoors. Drew Wendell, silver medal, 2018 World Indoors. And I was like, what the hell happened to those guys? All right, I'm going to try to put Robert on the spot. Robert, did either of those guys ever make the Olympics?
Well, definitely not for Berrien.
What are you talking about? He was an Olympic finalist.
Exactly. I was shocked.
Definitely not for Berrien.
I just was shocked. I was like, yeah, he won the World Indoors. I guess he didn't make the Olympic team that year. He's an Olympic finalist. I can't believe it. 2016 Olympic finalist. He's been hurt pretty much ever since. He has some results in 2018. That was it. And Drew Wendell's outdoor PR, I mean, for Americans, isn't that fast anymore. 144, I think 6. I joke that Wendell sort of, ever since he started the race, ran the race in Shanghai with the sunglasses on his head, it's been downhill since then.
The curse of the sunglasses. Well, all right, Drew made the world team in 2017. We got to remember that. And then there's going to be some college kid who's going to come out of the woodwork. And I don't think it really counts for Devin Dixon as coming out of the woodwork. He's a guy who's already run 144. He was the NCAA runner-up last year. But there's definitely going to be some college kid who inserts himself into the conversation at the trials as well. So men's 800, that might be the event of the trials, at least in January at this point. That's going to be really exciting. And actually, we're going to get a preview because in 2 weeks, less than 2 weeks now, at Millrose, Harris, Brazier, and Hoppel are all racing the 800 against each other, and Michael Cerrone, who ran 143 there last year. That is going to be a fantastic race at Millrose.
Wait, John, you left off Cerrone, who's like
I just said Cerrone.
number 2 ever. So say it again. People, being an ex-New Yorker, the Armory is it's still my indoor track. It's the official indoor track of Let'sRun.com. Oh, I forgot to say, did you guys see what I tweeted out? I had the number 1 media spot. I was all proud of myself.
Oh, I saw that. Yeah, usually for the Millrose games, we get sort of shifted towards the back. Not that I'm sitting there and watching the meets anyway, but
I'm not sure the New York Times actually showed up. So,
yeah.
They could give us a good spot, but I kind of laughed because usually we don't mind. They're like at Worlds sometimes. They're like, hey, you guys are younger. We're putting you upstairs because we know you guys can run up and down the stairs and stuff. But Millrose has got some great matchups, but I don't think there's anyone better than that men's 800. So Cerrone, the second fastest guy ever indoors, versus Brazier, versus Hoppel, versus Murphy?
Harris.
Am I missing someone?
Murphy's not running it. Harris is.
Yeah, Harris. So crazy 800.
Also at Millrose, just announced, Nico Young, the NXN champion in dominant fashion. He is going to be running the men's pro 3K. And there's also Edwin Kogart from Iowa State, the NCAA champion. He's not a pro either, but you've got the NCAA champion and the NXN champion squaring off. And Nico said he's going for not just the U.S. indoor high school record of 7:59 by Drew Hunter, but 7:56 is the under 20 U.S. indoor record. That's Chris Derrick from 2009. So that's going to be exciting to see him go for that time against a field of pros.
Yep, February 8th. Get your tickets.
We gave so much love to the U.S. men's 800 crew. How about the U.S. women? I mean, A.G. Wilson, another victory kind of in a modest time. I mean, how many times? Ajay Wilson. And get it right in 2020.
I didn't even have to correct you this time, Robert. This is great.
Yeah, well, speaking of corrections, I would like to make a correction. I think Walton last week said Teruku Bekele. I think it's Teruku. Anyways, side point. But she wins, what Audrey does every time except when it's the 2019 World Championship Final. Wins the race, ho-hum 202. Now, what was interesting to me was this was originally hyped as an Ajay Wilson, Raven Rogers battle between the two medalists from Worlds. The training partners were supposed to both race in this race. Then all of a sudden, Raven wasn't in the race. But I did notice, perusing through race results weekly, Raven did run in Boston at the Terrier Classic. And she ran 1,000 there, ran 239, actually beat a 201 Canadian in the race. So 239 is probably like 201 in the 800. So it's, pretty good performance. But I just thought it was interesting. They clearly were going to race each other, and then for some reason they decided not to. So, but the women's 800 is going to be tough too, because you've got those two who won medals at Worlds. You've got Hannah Green, who won a Diamond League race this year. And then you've got Sierra Brown, who is also a 158 performer. So again, one of those four is not going to be on the Olympic team.
Okay, one other quick observation I sort of had from from the Dr. Sander invite. Nikki Hiltz won the mile there, as expected, in 4:29. I just think the woman who got second behind her, BYU's Whitney Orton, she deserves a shout out because she, I don't think the last lap she was close. Like Hiltz, you would kind of expect the 4:01 woman, the World Championship finalist, to blow away a collegian, and Whitney Orton held her own. She set a BYU school record. She ran 4:29, which is an NCAA leader. And this is someone who, she has good strength. She ran 15:22 for 5K in December. She got 7th in NCAA cross. It's going to be interesting to see how she develops, but she's probably, the favorite in the mile at the NCAAs right now, and just a good run for her coming out to the East Coast.
Yeah, to show how far Nikki Hiltz came last year, I think that was a mile PR for her indoors, but she made the World Championship final last year. So they were also building a good group out there in San Diego. Mission AC, Nicole Hutchinson, who won the 3Ks, kind of like, Hiltz is the standard bearer in the group now, but they're all coached by Terrence Mahan. So kind of starting to, it'd be nice to have a full-fledged, another top-notch group in America. And mean, Hutchinson's Canadian, but that group is definitely emerging. And real quick, you guys mentioned Raven Rogers and Ajay. Ajay said she actually at one point wanted to run the mile herself at the Dr. Sander, but she got sick in December, so she dropped down to the 800. And I was asking her, like, hey, Raven beat you one time ever, but it was at the Worlds last year. Are you going to do anything differently this year? And she's like, I'm getting asked that question a lot, but I've analyzed it now and thought about it. I'm very confident what I've done in the past. I just had a bad race at the wrong time. It sounded like she wants to keep doing what she's going to keep doing. So
I think that's the right approach. She was unbeatable the whole rest of the season, and if she'd run up to her potential, I think she would have won that race. It was a long season. I don't think it was broken, I wouldn't fix it if I were her.
While we're talking women's middle distance, how about the winner of the mile at the New Balance Indoor Grand Prix meet was Jessica Hull of Australia. 4:04.14. I mean, that's a pretty quick indoor opener, in my opinion. She beats Kosterhofen. I guess they're training partners now. And they're now, they used to be in the Nike Oregon Project. They're with Pete Julian. That group still doesn't have a name. But, 4:04 impressed me this early. And I know Hull ended up running 4:01 at the World Championship semis. She ran 4:01.80 and didn't make the final. How crazy is that? But just think back to last year's NCAAs. I mean, she was like, the reigning NCAA champion, right, John, going in NCAA Outdoors. But her PR was for only 4:09. She runs like 4:06 mid and doesn't win, make it second, but was thrilled to make the World Championship standard. So not that long ago, she was excited to run 4:06. Then she runs 4:01, and now she's opening up in 4:04. So she's just, much more consistent and at a much higher level now that she's a pro. But again, think about this for a second. 4:01.80, and that placed her 8th. It wasn't that long ago, like when Morgan Usini was the number one 1,500 meter runner in the world, and Morgan never broke 4 flat.
Yeah, pretty crazy stuff. But Hull, she said she needs to be fit this time of year because she's Australian, and she is running both the 5,000 and the 1,500 at the Australian trials. There are 2 separate meets. So the Melbourne Track Classic, which is, I think, next week, she's running the 5,000 there to try to make in the Australian 5,000 trials. And then she's going to be flying back to the US for some more training, and then she was planning on flying to Nanjing for World Indoors. We don't know if that's going to happen anymore. And then fly back to Australia at the end of March for their regular Olympic trials in the 1,500. So she needs to be fit right now. And it's kind of interesting, Australia, the way they do it. They have their trials really early because that's at the end of the Australian summer when most of the local athletes are racing there. But for the truly, truly elite athletes who have dreams of making the World Championship final or winning a medal at the World Championships, the Olympic final or Olympic medals, that's pretty early to be like sort of peaked for, and then you have to sort of take a break. It's just an interesting sort of dynamic that they have to navigate, whereas the US trials are only about a month and a half before the Olympics. But yeah, she has a bright season ahead of her, I would say.
And I don't think she has anything to worry about. I was looking at the list here. I mean, she ran 15 flat in the 5,000 last year. The next closest Australian was 15:20. And then and the 1,500, it could be a little bit more dicey. I mean, Lyndon Hall has run 4 flat, 0.86. I think that was in 2018. But, she's still, I think, going to make either team. I mean, Lyndon Hall ran 4:04 last year, so it was 3 seconds better than anybody else there.
Well, we're talking about Australians. There was one who ran well at the Dr. Sander invite, Jordan Guzman. He's a 10-man elite guy.
He's not Australian, Weldon. He runs for Malta.
He 100% is Australian. He's an Australian citizen. And now runs for Malta, but he's still Australian. There's no question. He calls it home. And he chose to run for Malta because of his grandfather. He's, of Maltese descent. His grandfather moved to Australia. And Jordan said he'd always talked with his grandfather about running for Malta. And Jordan thought maybe later in his career, but his grandfather died last year. And so Jordan represented Malta. What's that meet called? It's like...
It was like the Games of the Small States of Europe or something.
Yeah, I was about to say Small States Games. And there's no looking back because I don't know the exact rules, but you can't just switch back to Australia. But Jordan said, look, I'm getting a lot more support from Malta. I assume that means money. And he trains with Tin Men Elite of Canada. So now Jordan has the Maltese flag and the Tin Men Elite tattoo on his legs.
That was the most shocking thing I saw from that interview, is that he has trained with Tin Man Elite for less than a year, and he already got their logo tattooed on his leg. Like, he's basically just locked in. Like, what if Nike comes in with some big contract and he starts doing really well, and they're like, hey, we want you to try to train with the Bowerman Track Club, or, if he gets, like, he grows disenchanted or injured and wants to move elsewhere, but he's got this Tin Man logo on his, leg. I just think it's a pretty bold commitment to be making less than 1 year into training with this group.
Yeah. Hey, it's like freshman year of college, or not my freshman year. Matt Taylor, founder of Tracksmith, who was on my Yale team, and I swear, like a couple weeks in, he shows up with a bulldog tattoo. Maybe when school starts, and his big buddy went to run for Duke, got a Blue Devil tattoo. We're like, wow, you guys are all in. The other guy, I think, was going to quit the team in about 6 months, but I guess he was still a Blue Devil. College is a little bit different. As long as you don't transfer schools, you can have the tattoo, but training groups sort of come and go. But it was also kind of crazy. Jordan said Instagram is now a way these groups recruit people. He's like, yeah, I saw the guys on Instagram, liked what they did, and kind of called up and said, hey, I'm interested. And they're like, hey, come on out, see if you like it. So he's running very well. He pulled away like, I don't know, I'm going to say 800 to go, mid-race, maybe even before that. And some guys tried to run him down at the end, but it was a very strong and confident move. And the other crazy thing, we should give a shout out to this. I'd never heard of something like this. He had never stepped on an indoor track until the day of the race. I was like, oh, you did strides the day before. He goes, no, my plane got in late last night. So he shows up, never run an indoor track in his life. So this is banked. It seems like it'd be very hard to do. I would totally expect him to run like shit. And instead he goes out and wins 3K.
If you're fast, you're fast. Let's talk about another interesting development. I'm kind of shocked it took us this long to get here. Edward Cheserek. The news was broken last week that he is going to try to run for Kenya for World Indoors and for the Olympics this year. Big development. He's been trying, as everyone knows, to get U.S. citizenship for the last few years, and unsuccessfully. I don't know if he's still in that process or not, but he hasn't been able to get it, and he certainly wouldn't have been able to get it in time for the United States Olympic trials this year. So he's going to try to run for Kenya. I think he's got a pretty decent shot. You look at some of his times from previous years. I think, when Kenya wasn't, they're starting to develop a little bit better now in the 5,000, but certainly 2016, they didn't have any Olympic finalists. 2017, they had one World Championship finalist. I think either of those years, if he had been healthy, he could have made the final at those global championships. So it's going to be interesting to see whether first of all, if there is a World Indoors, if he makes that team. He got blown out by Bethwell Bergen in the 3K in Boston, but he still ran 7:46, so not that many Kenyans ran indoors. That might be good enough. Then outdoors, he'll have to go out there for their trials, and I think it's good he's now based in Flagstaff because they'll get ready for, if he's competing at elevation in their trials. But it's going to be very interesting to follow his process, his season this summer.
Very interesting there, John. When you opened the show, you said used the word once. He wants to compete for Kenya. And then just now you said tries. I think tries is the accurate thing.
Yeah, sorry. I did I say once at the start? That's not what yeah.
And I think this is a very interesting development. Guys, this is a guy that he's been living in the U.S. for
almost 10 years now.
Almost 10 years. He wanted to run for the U.S. He can't get the citizenship. And he really has no other option. I mean, if he wants to run in the Olympics, he's missing the prime of his career. Think about how hard it'd be to train if he couldn't go to the Olympics or Worlds. It'd be like, what are you training for? And we kind of joked in the past, he's the king of running fast when nobody's paying attention because he geared up for the indoor season. So now he has something to train for, which is good. But I don't know. I guess he can't with the change of allegiance. John, could he ever switch back to the U.S.? Let's say he gets citizenship and.
I know they tightened up the restrictions. It would be at least, I think, about 3 years after running to switch citizenship, and that would just be burning. He's already lost 3 years, essentially, of trying to run internationally, so I don't think he'd want to lose another 3.
And And that's going to bring me to Rojo rant number 2 of the podcast. So it came out the day before the race that he'd be running for Kenya. They didn't really send out a press release. Just Stephen Haas said that his agent was trying to get a World Indoor Qualifier. And people were like, wait a minute, why are you getting the World Indoor Qualifier? And then I think he confirmed to Chris Chavez that, he was going to run for Kenya. So there was no press release that he'd be running for Kenya. And maybe Edward didn't want to do that because he really wanted to run for the U.S. But then after the race, Jonathan asked him about the race and then asked the obvious question, like, hey, you're switching over to Kenya. You've announced you're going to run for Kenya. And then Edward doesn't even let it go to a question. Like, he just walks off and storms off. And I don't understand this. Like, how can he not be prepared for this question? So again, Saturday, we're celebrating Christmas with the in-laws. We had a date night with the wife. I went to a movie. I come back. And there's all these texts about how Cheswick stormed off. And I'm like, oh, wow, did John ask him an inappropriate question or try to do gotcha journalism? And then I watched the video. I was like, this is the most basic, obvious question. It wasn't gotcha journalism. It was like just the start of the interview. And he wasn't ready for it and he stormed off. And I thought to myself, Jonathan, guys, if you haven't been to the website this last week, Jonathan has a 3-part series, thousands of words on how to turn pro in track and field. And he talks about agents and you sign with an agent. And are they worth their 15% of your contract? And this week, Edward Cheswick's agency let him down. How they didn't have him prepared for this question is beyond me. I mean, of course he's going to be asked about this. How can he not be ready to answer this? Now, it might be tough for him to answer it because I think deep down, I think they could have done a really good job. They could actually they could get all the Trump haters on his side. Although I'm not sure Trump really has anything to do with it because it took Sam Chalanga 5 years to get his citizenship too. But he could say, you know what, I've been living in this country for close to a decade. I desire nothing more than to run for the United States of America, but they won't let me be a citizen. I'm going to have to run for Kenya. That would have been very powerful. Now, he may not have wanted to do that because then the Kenyans would see it. And the way Kenya picks the team is sometimes not that objective. Sometimes it's a little bit subjective. Maybe he'd piss people off. And maybe he's upset. Who knows? Maybe the contract's different if he doesn't make the U.S. team versus the Kenya team. I can understand why he's upset, but I just think this was handled abysmally from a PR perspective.
Yeah, and I have sympathy for him. Obviously, he's been this isn't an easy situation. He can't do what he wants to do, and I know there's frustration there, but I think you have to understand that's a question you're going to be asked. I think he could have handled it better, but if he doesn't want to talk about it, which clearly he doesn't, it's very sensitive. As a journalist, I would have preferred no comment, but it's his prerogative. No one ever forces people to stop in the mix zone if they don't want to talk. So I don't know.
Well, I think athletes should be forced to stop. I mean, NBA and stuff has it, or say some comments. PR and engaging with the press is part of it. Obviously, you don't have to answer questions you don't want to answer, so just no comment. And the whole thing is a bit, I don't know if sad is the right word, but it's clear Edward wants to be a U.S. citizen. I think this clearly means his citizenship is not anywhere in the pipeline. And I think it was a New York Times piece from a few years ago. I feel like this wasn't, I don't know how easy it is for someone who goes to school here. He came here in high school, so it's a little bit different to get citizenship. But for the rest of us who are citizens, I think a lot of us just take it for granted. The guy clearly wants to be a citizen. I think this means this isn't happening anytime soon. And his only option, if he wants to complete internationally in, say, the next 4 years or so, is to run for Kenya. So it is what it is. And at a personal level, it's got to be very hard for Edward. And he didn't like talking about it in the past. And John, you'd ask him about in the past, and he'd sort of given no comment. And I think Edward doesn't handle questions he doesn't like, or when he doesn't run that well. Engaging with him one-on-one, he's a great guy, but just some people just hate losing. He hates losing. But now the situation changed. Of course, you're going to ask him about it. But hey, I think he could have just say, I really want to be a U.S. citizen. That's not going to happen. So, I'm really proud of being Kenyan. I'm Kenyan, and that's what it's going to be.
Yeah, it's hard to do, though, because then some Kenyan, he's going to get flack either way. Some people in Kenya are going to gripe. But, yeah, if he says that I'm proud of my Kenyan heritage, I'm going to run for them now, I think he could, there's a way to do it right. But it just needs
You can have love for more than one country. I love the United States. I love United Kingdom. I'm from both of those places. I think people, like when Leo Manzano took that victory lap and he had the Mexican flag, people criticized him. But I think it's just, and I think it's just absurd to say just because you love one country, you can't love another country. Some people have more than one country in there as part of their heritage. I think you should be allowed to embrace that.
I know. And speaking of such, Jonathan Galt said Jordan Guzman is not Australian. So I think we need John to declare himself in terms of being a journalist and representing the country right now. Are you American or British?
I'm both. I have dual citizenship. Well, then, the beauty of this is I don't have to choose.
No, you must pick. You forced Jordan Guzman to pick. He has dual citizenship.
No, I was inappropriate there. You can be Maltese and Australian. You can love both countries. I don't think it's. I was sort of probably out of line there.
Problem is, this shows like with sports, right? You can't be both. You have to pick. Whereas, like, it's a terrible analogy actually, but like the gender divisions, there's two divisions. You're one or the other for competing.
Yeah, that's a little, maybe not appropriate analogy, but no, well, like the World Cup for soccer, I'm England 100%. My dad would disown me first of all if I didn't root for England, but it's for stuff like that you have to choose. But for like culture, you can say I get parts of my culture. I celebrate the 4th of July, but I also like celebrating, English holidays and that sort of thing.
You don't have to choose, John. You can have several teams in the World Cup. Why can't you support England and the U.S.? They rarely play each other. I have several NFL teams. I root for the Cowboys until they inevitably don't make the playoffs, and then I root for the Ravens.
That's a loser mentality. You get one team in the pro sports leagues, one team in the World Cup.
Okay, John, if you were an athlete, let's say we do pay for your 2-year sabbatical to make the Olympic trials or try to make the, which team would you compete for in the Olympics? Track and field. I assume if it's soccer, you try to go England World Cup. But I see an England flag in the back of your room right now. But assuming you were not good enough to make the England World Cup team and you were a good professional soccer player, I'm assuming you would eventually play for the U.S. Like if they offered you a spot.
If I was good enough to play for the U.S. and not good enough to play for England, I'd probably play for the U.S. But if I was good enough to play for the U.S., I would probably have the confidence that I could get good enough to eventually play for England and make it to the Premier League.
But let's turn it to track and field, John.
Yeah.
You wake up tomorrow. I've put something in your drink. I've talked to Alberto. You wake up, and for some reason, you're in 1252 shape.
Probably United Kingdom. I mean, Great Britain and Northern Ireland, just because that was who I grew up rooting for in the Olympics. That's who, my dad's a big sports fan. That's who we always supported at the Olympics. So I don't root for countries now at the Olympics as a journalist, but that I don't know. I wouldn't mind running for the U.S. I feel like I'm a bigger. I grew up as a runner in the United States and looking at those guys, so I followed the American running scene more closely than the British running scene. But I'd probably be Great Britain, but it'd be a tough decision.
That's the problem with the media right now. The fake news in the media. John says he doesn't root for people. He's a human being. Of course, he's going to have allegiances. John, you're telling me if the Patriots made the Super Bowl and you had to cover them, you secretly wouldn't be rooting for them?
Well, no, I'm not an NFL reporter. I'd have to think about that, and I think now it's more common. You see media members actually having a rooting allegiance. It'd be tough to put that behind me. But if I'm working for the Globe, if I was covering the Patriots for the Globe, I would have to get rid of my Patriots. I couldn't be a Patriots fan anymore. If I was working for Let'sRun.com covering the Super Bowl, I think I'd probably be able to. I wouldn't be openly cheering for them in the press box, but I want them to win because you guys wouldn't make me strip my fandom. But I think in running, it's pretty easy to be an objective journalist. Okay, there are a couple. If you're a Dartmouth alum, if I ran with you in college or was friends with you in college, I probably want you to do well. But apart from that, most athletes I don't have a favorite, and it's in an individual sport. I feel like it's easier not to have a favorite as opposed to a team sport where you have a team and a connection to that city. Okay,
I thought we were going to go to the Super Bowl. I mean, remember?
We'll get to the Super Bowl eventually. I want to talk about one other Flagstaff-based runner who ran fast this weekend, Tyler Day, NAU. He ran at BU on Friday night. They had a race to try to get the Olympic standards. No one ended up getting it. Eric Jenkins fell a little short. He was sort of driving the pace and fell off at the end. Paul Tuohy of Kenya, the Olympic silver medalist who's now training under Pete Julian, he got the win in 13:15, but the race of the night was Tyler Day of NAU. He runs 13:16 for second place. He becomes the fastest American collegian of all time indoors, removing Galen Rupp gets his name taken out of the record books there. Rupp ran 13:18 back in 2009. That was an American indoor record as well at the time. It's since been broken a couple times, but Rupp is taken down by a coach. So Galen Rupp, who's coached by Mike Smith, he gets kicked out of the record books by another guy who's coached by Mike Smith, Tyler Day. And this is the Dreams Become Reality segment of the week. Tyler Day, do you guys know his high school personal best for 1,600 meters and 3,200 meters?
No.
Robert, any guesses?
No.
4:20 and 9:28. I was a faster high school 2-miler than Tyler Day, and he ran 13:16. That's pretty incredible progression. I talked to Mike Smith about him a couple years ago. He's an Arizona kid, but he didn't grow up in Flagstaff, and he's a really big altitude responder. Obviously, he's worked hard the last couple of years as well. He sat out the cross-country season because he didn't have eligibility, but he said he was really excited. He didn't do as well in track as he wanted to last year, and this was sort of redemption for him. And now he's looking full steam ahead. He's probably, I don't think he's going to make the Olympic team because the U.S. is pretty deep in the 5K, but he'll certainly make the trials, and who knows how much better he can get from here. If you're running 13:16 in January, he's sort of thinking, granted it's at BU, it's a race tailored for everyone to go fast, but he beat Eric Jenkins. He was hanging with the Olympic silver medalist Paul Tuohy. Tuohy didn't embarrass him by any means, so very interested to see how Tyler Day does the rest of the season. And with NCAA's at altitude, it's going to be in Albuquerque. It's going to be a very interesting showdown between Day and Edwin Kurgart, the NCAA cross-country champ. He ran 13:24 at BU in December. That is going to be one of the races of the meet.
Speaking of Day, I think according to Track and Field News list, this is the 5th fastest indoor or outdoor 5,000 time during the collegiate season. So very impressive. But guys, enough track talk. Let's talk about some marathons. There were a couple of them last week. We had Dubai, but what I want to talk about is something that has not gotten much publicity. The Asaka Women's Marathon in Japan. And this is really cool. Japan has a new Olympian. Mizuku Matsuda, who was 4th in their what was it called, John? Their Olympic trials is called, I think,
Marathon Grand Championship.
Marathon Grand Championship. So normally you're 4th in Olympic trials. You're not going to the Olympics. But what Japan did was they said only the top 2 are guaranteed to go. 3rd will go unless somebody else breaks, and I think the time was 2:22 low for the women, and I think it's like 2:05:50.
They need to break the national record on the men's side, which is 2:05:50.
Yeah, but it wasn't the national record for the women. It was like 2:22 low. Anyways, Mizuka Matsuda has won the Osaka women's race in 2:21:47. So she, as of now, is going to the Olympics, and Rio Hara, who was 3rd at the trials, is not. O'Hara was actually in this race. It was interesting. She did run it. She went out hard, not as hard as Matsuda. Matsuda went out in 69:54. O'Hara went out in 70:28. I guess she was trying to track her, but she blew up and ran 2:28:12. So tough for O'Hara, but pretty cool for Matsuda. So I love this.
It's interesting. If someone runs faster than Matsuda at the Nagoya Marathon, which is the final race in this Japanese series, they will kick Matsuda off the team and take 3rd. So it's a really interesting system. I think it would be pretty cool. I like the U.S. system. You just know with finality who's on the team, and that battle for 3rd is really important. But I do think this is an interesting way of drumming up interest in these other Japanese races. And you're going to see it again in Tokyo. So February 29th, it's not just the Olympic trials in the U.S., but that night, technically the Tokyo Marathon is March 1st in Japan, but it's in the US. It's actually February 29th, the night of February 29th. It's on TV. So that's an amazing doubleheader for marathon fans. You get the US Olympic trials in the afternoon and the Tokyo Marathon in the evening. And the biggest story there, well, you've got Bahonu Legesse, who's the defending champ, coming back, and he ran 2:02 in Berlin. He's a stud. It's going to be interesting to see him run. But the biggest storyline there is Yuta Shitara, the former marathon national record holder in Japan, is facing off against Suguru Asako, the current national record holder and the man who was 3rd at the trials. And Asako will be fighting to defend his spot, whereas Shitara, if he breaks the national record, he's on the team. But he's told Brett Lana had an article on his site saying that Shitara says unless he runs 2:04, he won't be accepting his spot on the team. Because Shitara, remember, this is the guy who totally went out really hard and tried to run super fast in the trials and blew up. But he's just a really unique runner, and he's like, yeah, that's just the high standard he's holding himself to, and he needs to be in 2:04 shape to medal anyway. So he's basically saying he 2:05. If he runs 2:05:20 and breaks the national record, he's not going to take his spot. We'll see if he actually if he holds himself to that, but it's pretty crazy proclamation.
The other big marathon last weekend was the Standard Chartered Dubai Marathon. Now, it's not quite as big as it used to be because they cut the prize money from $200,000 for first place down to $100,000 last year. But still, the men's race ended up being pretty crazy. Nobody really was pushing it that fast. 11 men ended up kicking it home for the $100,000 first prize. This was crazy. I didn't think the commentators, I think we had Hutchings and Paul Radcliffe, but they didn't. While they were excited about the race, they weren't excited. They didn't point this out. Somebody was going to win $100,000, and somebody, 11th place finisher, was going to win $0. So, and first place goes to Alika Adugna Bakila. I imagine none of you had ever heard of him. 206.15. He wins the $100,000, and the 11th place finisher was Bersha Ezekia, 206.34. He gets nothing. But to me, John, I mean, other than the mass finish, which was kind of interesting, the real storyline here was, to me, the women's race. Workness to Gefa, she was second in Dubai last year. She wins Boston, and she wins Dubai again. I mean, she's really established herself as a very consistent performer, one of the top women marathoners in the world. Went out kind of hard, died a little bit, so 2:19:38, but held on for the win.
Well, she was also battling a back issues the second half of that race. I think she would have run faster if she hadn't sort of been cramping up, and she didn't look great when she crossed the line. So she wasn't 100%. She had some injury issues and still ran 2:19. That's pretty crazy. She's lining up in Boston in less than 3 months from now.
Well, guys, do we have anything else we want to talk about, or do we want to send everyone off into a what will happen? Though one thing that's going to be happening soon. And we haven't done it. We have mentioned Alberto Salazar, but we have not had our weekly Vaporfy segment. I don't know if we want to have it, folks, but by this time next week, World Athletics is supposed to have issued a ruling on the shoes that'll be allowed in 2020.
Yeah, I think let's just hold segment till next week, and we've got some more concrete stuff. There's speculations. I mean, the media, some details are trickling out, but I think it's probably best to just wait until their announcement.
No, let's go there real quickly.
Oh my God, all right.
I just think a few things. If they put some regulations in place and the Nike shoes are allowed and other companies can't come out with similar prototypes, that's a huge advantage for Nike. So we need to hopefully, I know if people listen to this, you need to think about that. A lot of times, like now, and I'm aware of this because of digital advertising, some of the big players now are like, oh yeah, we're for regulation. We're all about protecting privacy. In reality, they have a huge business interest in putting down regulation because the smaller people can't compete with it. But we just need to be careful that because we had said no prototypes, but really what we're about is a fair playing field for everybody. So I don't want someone, if possible, to be at a disadvantage because of what shoe company they run for.
Yeah, I had said, the rule is simple. You say the shoe has to be out by January 1st or something, but then we realized that would be a problem because Jared Ward's shoe is not out. So it's been floated. We've seen some things behind the scenes that the ruling may be nothing that's out. It has to be commercially available. Otherwise, you can't run in it, which would be actually the dumbest decision ever.
Commercially available for 4 months.
Which would be a disaster because it would actually just entrench the Nike advantage because the problem isn't prototypes. The problem is one type of shoe being better than every other types of shoe. So if the competitors are playing catch up, you need to let them play catch up. The problem is, but to me, this is all an acknowledgement of, yes, there is, some people do have an unfair advantage in shoes. So I don't really care. I'm still looking for them to, instead of looking forward, let's look back and let's validate those 2016 Olympic marathon champions. I'm sorry, Galen Rupp. I'm sorry, Eliud Kipchoge. You were guilty of mechanical doping, whether you know it or not. Those rules need to be validated. And folks, that's what I'm going to do today after this podcast. I will be writing that article. Look for it on letsrun.com.
I feel like you've already written that article 5 times, Robert. Does anyone really want to read that again?
Wait, hasn't he already written that article? But everyone was waiting with their beers by hand, waiting for Robert to call for the 2016 Olympic marathon trials to be invalidated. So drink up.
Robert's on his deathbed. His final words are going to be like, invalidate the 2016 Olympic marathon results. Avenge me.
Speaking of such, though, we haven't done top threads of the week in a while or deleted threads of the week, but just looking at the top thread of the week, and it was the Kara Goucher thread. I think this was in the, was it Daily Mail?
I thought it was like Business Insider or something.
Oh, yeah, Business Insider. Yeah, that's it. Roger Pielke wrote it. The thread's titled, I didn't go to Rio because Shalene and Amy wore Vaporflies, which is the same as EPO. And Carol, wasn't explicitly as that, but she's like, look, they had an unfair advantage. I didn't even realize it was a big deal at the time, but now I do. So it's kind of crazy. It's already been 4 years, almost, since the trials, 4 years already. This thing hasn't been sorted out, but I don't think really it took 2 years to kind of figure out what was going on.
One more thing I wanted to hit before we get to a quick Super Bowl preview. A big game in the United States for our American listeners. Hopefully you're a football fan overseas, but can understand if you're not. Okay, one more thing before we get to a quick Super Bowl preview. The Daily Mail is reporting that Great Britain will not send a team to the World Indoor Championships in Nanjing, China in March. And I'm not totally surprised by that because many of their top stars are not even going to be going. I think that's sort of the case with certainly the US as well. It doesn't seem like a lot of top Americans will be trying to run there. But just the more we hear about this coronavirus outbreak in China, and it's started in Wuhan, which is about 300 miles away from Nanjing, and it doesn't seem to be getting any better. I think a lot of countries are going to be worried about this. I would be surprised at this point if Nanjing hosts the World Championships this year. I think the meet will either be canceled or relocated, and probably canceled because, again, not a lot of top athletes have so far expressed interest in doing it, and also because it's just very hard to find a new venue and get it turned around quickly. Weldon, you said you think it's going to be canceled. Robert, what do you think? Canceled, relocated, or go on as scheduled?
I think it's going to be canceled. One thing that's made it tough this year is the World Outdoors were a month later than normal, and the Olympics are pretty early next year, so that's really cramping things down. If you're a U.S. distance runner, it's hard to be in shape, and even the guys that are running indoors now don't really want to have to try to peak for March and then be ready for June again. So, but I'm a big fan of World Indoors. I hope that they move it. Some people are saying they could move it to Poland. I would like to see that. But, John, it's kind of ironic that Britain pulled out. Did you see yesterday? That was the same day that I notified the World Athletics people that I would not be attending. I had talked to my wife. She said because of the virus, I could not go. And I said, Let's Run may go if you relocate it. So perhaps, I think Britain probably leaked that to the British Athletics and said, if Let's Run's not going, we're not going to bother either. So we always go to World Indoors. If they reschedule it.
Well, we don't always go because we weren't going to go this year.
What do you mean we weren't going to go? We were trying to go. It was the same weekend as NCAA Indoors. I was thinking of having John go there since neither Steve nor myself could go with young children. But this is my problem with it. World Indoors was a really big deal when it was in America and we all had to go. Then the Americans don't bother when it's not in America. So support track and field. But the Olympic year is just hard because that's everyone's contract's based on that. Everyone's dream is the Olympics. So.
All right, well, let's close it out. Quick look at Super Bowl 54. Unfortunately, the Cowboys for the 100th year in a row won't be in it, and the Patriots for the first time since 2016. That's the last time that the Patriots were not in the Super Bowl. It is the San Francisco 49ers and the Kansas City Chiefs. I'm really excited for this game. They've been two of the best teams all season. I think Baltimore was the best team in the league this year, but they got upset, Robert. Apologies to your second favorite team or third favorite team, something like that, whatever. Who are you guys picking? The gambling line, I think, is Chiefs by 1. I'm going Kansas City. What do you guys think?
Thank you, John. Thank you for actually getting in the gambling line. I see that Barstool Sports has sold for $450 million to Penn Gaming. So clearly we need to start talking about gambling a little bit more on this podcast. Chiefs are 1-point favorites, so yeah, they're going to win. I don't want some team wait, hey, John, I thought that the 49ers were all about Jimmy G. Did they just run the ball? I couldn't even name their running back.
Have you watched any of their games? Well,
I watched the last game, but was that an anomaly? Before that, I was hearing about the Titans guy who ran all over the place. So, who's their number one running back? I know about I keep reading about the fullback. I don't know if that's subtle racism. All I read about is the 49ers fullback.
That's your Ivy League. That's your Ivy League elitism right there. Kyle Juszczyk of Harvard is that.
No, it's just I read the Wall Street Journal. I'm an informed person.
Ivy League elitism right there.
It used to be a Kelsey, the tight end. Now they're running. Well, it's upsetting to
Kelsey, he's on the Chiefs. What are you talking about?
I mean, Kittle. Excuse me.
George Kittle.
My wife's fantasy star. Got my K's wrong there, but. Well, Weldon's just upset because it shows that you can have a no-name running back and still have a dominant running game. So, and their coach is actually smart enough to do figure out what's working. Shanahan Jr. is smart enough. If something's working, he'll just run the ball the whole game. I think he passed 8 times last game or something. So I'm worried about the 49ers. I don't want them to win. I do not want Jimmy Garoppolo to win this thing. This guy went on a date with a porn star. To me, that's somewhat. I just think it's going to hurt Tom Brady's legacy. John talked about my favorite teams.
You think it's going to hurt Tom Brady's legacy if Jimmy Garoppolo?
It's Cowboys 1. Redskins is watching Redskins is supported by my wife 2, and then my number 3 teams, although they're kind of moving up, is Baltimore.
Your top 2 teams are division rivals, Robert. This makes no sense.
It was Baltimore and New England because I love Brady. I said maybe Baltimore's vaulted to number 2, but John, this is easy. Weldon and I, we have our hometown team in the Super Bowl, baby. The Kansas City Chiefs. They started as the Dallas Texans. Go Chiefs.
Wow, I forgot about that. Yes. We love the Chiefs.
All right. Weldon, since you couldn't name him, I'm going to give him some respect. Raheem Mostert is their running back. He rushed for NFC Championship game record. I think it was 220 yards, 4 touchdowns. He'd been cut by 6 other teams in the league and suddenly breaks out this year because they'd had injuries to Tevin Coleman and another running back.
So Shanahan will just do whatever works, or all season they've been running a lot?
They like to. I mean, they're a run first team, and Shanahan is really creative with some of the run plays he comes up with. But they're not afraid to give it to Jimmy Garoppolo. There's this narrative out there that oh yeah, they're trying to hide Garoppolo as a game manager. No, I mean, if you watch they played the Saints, they beat them 46-45 in New Orleans, and Jimmy G was throwing all over the place. They've got weapons. They've got Kittle, who's also an excellent blocker. They've got Deebo Samuel. They've got Emmanuel Sanders. They will throw it, but here's the thing. When you're running for 6 yards a pop and the other team can't stop you on the ground, why would you give it to your quarterback?
Maybe I need to go back and watch that game and just see the offensive plays, because they had, 8 passes? Is that it? I just want to see them just hand the ball off every single time, because I really haven't seen that. But is this going to be like last year's Super Bowl? Remember, they've got some C.J. Anderson. So now the 49ers have some no-name running back who was cut, and everyone was talking about him. And then in the actual game, the running attack isn't there.
I mean, that's what happens. How often do teams with stud running backs win the Super Bowl? It never happens anymore. I guess Marshawn Lynch was probably the last time that a team had a dominant running back that won. And even then, the defense was the best part of that team, the Seahawks in 2013. It's not necessary, and that's why you guys are in trouble, because you paid all this money to your running back, and now you're going to have to pay your quarterback as well. You're not going to have any room for the Cowboys. Aren't going to have enough room to buy any other good players on that team. But I don't think it's going to be a low-scoring game. I think it's going to be an exciting one. These are 2 excellent teams. San Francisco defense going against Patrick Mahomes. We haven't even mentioned him. That guy's a magician. I'm really excited. It's going to be nice. Well, it's not going to be nice not having the Patriots in it, but it's going to be less stressful than usual. When your team's in the Super Bowl, you live and die with every play. It's a very stressful experience. It's rewarding if you win, but it sucks if you lose. This is just going to be nice. I can sort of relax, and my friends. We're going to be watching with one of my friends from college who's a Chiefs fan, so I do kind of want Jimmy G to win. But if the Chiefs win, I'll be happy for my buddy.
Wow, that's the biggest loser mentality. It's less stressful now. This is how the slow decline starts, John. Rome didn't fall in a day. You just start having that mentality, and man, I'd love to have the stress of a Super Bowl. How about them Cowboys?
I would like to apologize to those of you that think that Super Bowl talk is sexism. I've been trying to become a little bit more woke, call John out when he focuses on men's running more than women's running. And I was reading this week that some think...
When I focus on men's running more than women's running...
Hey, for some people, everything's sexism. People in Let's Run were pointing out with Kobe's death.
I read this, that some women want to stop sports talk at work because there aren't as many women that are sports fans, so they feel left out of the conversation.
Hey, not everything is equal or has to be fair in life. If men want to talk about sports, what's wrong? Women can talk about whatever, or any group of people can talk about whatever. And no, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. People can find sexism in everything. I saw this thing linked to on Let's Run with Kobe's death, and this was posted before his death. But Sally of Wazelle was pointing to an article where Kobe had said, I think 3 women could play in the NBA right now. And that it was irresponsible journalism and sexism to have that, and that a man shouldn't be the arbiter of discussing women's sports. like he said it. Like someone can't write an article about it. It's just, oh my gosh, it's just sort of crazy. Like women's sports and men's sports are played on different levels, and to ask, could the women play in the NBA? Like that's like we're supposed to like shut down that train of thought now. Like I mean that's kind of crazy.
Also, how is he unqualified to answer that? Kobe Bryant watches plenty of women's basketball. It's not like he's someone who's just saying that ignorantly. Like he watched the women's game. So I disagree with that statement. But the 3 women could play in the NBA. But he watches a lot more women's basketball than I do. So who's the one talking out of their ass here? It's me.
Well, no, apparently it's anyone who even brings up that conversation, because then women's sports are being evaluated on a male platform, and that's sexist. So, hey, I just think you need some perspective at times. Is there sexism, racism? Yes, of course there is. But I would argue, if you're a minority, a female, an underprivileged group, anything, pick any time in the world you'd rather be born, I would say right now. Does that mean it's perfect? No, but like there's just a lot of times no sense of perspective, and if you view the world through that prism, you can find examples wherever. So hey, it's easiest for me for a white male to not focus or get caught up on these things, but I just like to evaluate things on who they are. It's just a lot easier for me.
All right, well, I think we're going off the rails a little bit here. I think this is a good discussion this week, but we're ready to move on to the Super Bowl. Everyone enjoy your Super Bowl parties. It's still a travesty the day after the Super Bowl is a national holiday. I'll have to get, next president to work on that one. I'm surprised Trump hasn't. That's one initiative of Trump. If he got on that, I could get behind that. But
yeah, I mean, that would play right up to Trump's base, right?
You would think, right? That's a win for everyone.
Oh, wait. Oh, my God. The Iowa caucuses are on Monday, I think. I kept saying we're going to have a political segment with Eric live on the boots on the ground in Iowa. I guess it's not going to happen, people.
Just like Weldon's never going to give us his favorite things about New York.
You want him now?
Well, give it to us next week's Milrose week. How about we talk about that next week on the podcast as we preview Milrose? Weldon gives us his 5 favorite things about New York.
All right, we'll save those for next week. And next week, we'll be kicking off something new on Let's Run. It's Hoka Marathon Month. Robert talked to Ben Rosario. We're going to be kind of going behind the scenes with some sponsored look at some of the Hoka people getting ready for the trials. They've got contenders on the men's side, women's side. Jim Walmsley. I swear like every other thread now on the Let's Run forums is about Jim Walmsley banging out, 2,000 miles up a mountain. And
people are obsessed with that guy. Yeah, Jim Walmsley could like eat a candy bar or something. They'd be like, Jim Walmsley spotted eating like 100 grand bar in streets. Is this good for his training? How will he do in the trials? Like anytime I see a serious discussion of like who's going to make the Olympic marathon team, there'll be someone who'll just fly in and say, "Oh, Walmsley," and then everyone else. I'm just like,
and I'm pretty big at like detecting trolls and stuff on there. Pretty good at it, and they're not. I really think it's like different people, legitimate people.
I'm going to be fascinated to see how he does. I'm genuinely excited to see how he does. I don't think he has a prayer to make the team, but I really am going to be excited to see how he runs in Atlanta.
All right. Until next week, signing off.